You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com, thechrisvossshow.com. Welcome to the big show, the big circus tent in the sky, the big empire of data and information that will make you smarter, brillianter, and also when you're smarter and brillianter, I read that you're sexier to whoever you might want to be sexier to. I don't know if that's true, but the lawyer said I can probably get away with that one without being sued because there's no real corporation behind the sexuality. At least I don't think so. I don't know. Maybe that's the thing. Anyway, guys, before we do get those C&Ds from whoever was offended by me making that joke, be sure to refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. I never know what the ramble's going to be on any given day. You're going to have to tune in and see what each one is. It's all improv. Anyway, guys, youtube.com/Chris Voss, goodreads.com/Chris Voss, yeah, linkedin.com/Chris Voss. See that big LinkedIn newsletter? That thing is killing it over there. In fact, there's a couple of them. There's the Chris Voss Show, there's the Chris Voss on LinkedIn, and there's the Beacons of Leadership, and then there's also another one. So it's just a great place to be over there on LinkedIn. Some crazy numbers we've been seeing from that area over there. Anyway, we have an amazing author on the show today. I'm sure you're here for the brain bleed, because I think that's the theme of the show. So I have some authors sometimes come on and go, wait, you're going to make your guests brain bleed with my information? Not really, but we're still waiting to be sued for that too. Anyway, guys, we have the author of the amazing new book. It came out February 21st, 2023, The Curse of the Marquis de Sade. I believe I had that pronounced correctly. Yeah, there you go. You can hear the author in the background chiming in. So we got his validation there. A notorious scoundrel, a mythical manuscript, and the biggest scandal in literary history. And that's not me or my book. That's this gentleman, The Curse of the Marquis de Sade. Joel Warner is on the show with us today. He's going to be talking to us about his amazing book. And, you know, I got to tell you, this is a side note. I don't know why we're doing side notes, because we're breaking the fourth wall on the show, but here we are. I just make it up as I go along, people. We don't write this show. Anyway, what was interesting was when I saw Joel's book, and, we go through all the really cool books that are out there. And when I saw his book, I was like, I've never heard of this. And I've heard a lot of stuff. As most of you know on the show, I can talk just about anything and everything. But I never heard of this book. And I was like, I really want to know what this is about. So I think you're going to want to know what it's about, because you're actually going to find out that this is the core basis for some of the things you might have heard in life, or some of the things you might be interested in. Anyway, welcome to the show, Joel. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Thanks for coming. And it's an honor to have you on to talk about some of your stuff. Give us your .com so people can find you on the interwebs.
It's complicated. You go to www.joelwarner, like Warner Brothers.com. So www.joelwarner.com.
There you go. Any relation to the Warner Brothers owner? I forget his name.
As far as I know, unfortunately, no relation. But, if somebody has a connection, please let me know.
There you go. In fact, you think I'd remember his name? I was actually watching the Treasure of the Sierra Madre with Humphrey Bogart, I think last night or something. And I was on a 24-hour fast, so I'm not sure what happened last night. But somehow I got through 24 hours of fast. Joel Warner is a writer and editor whose work has appeared in Esquire, Wired, Newsweek, Men's Journal, Bloomberg, Business Week, Popular Science, and Slate, among others. He's currently the managing editor of the investigative news outlet The Lever, and previously worked as staff writer at International Business Times and Westworld. He's co-author of The Humor Code. He lives with his family in Denver, Colorado. So, Joel, what motivated you, with that history you have in your rich bio, to write this book?
So, like a lot of journalists, I'm just fascinated by super interesting stories. Stories, as you said, that I've never heard about, and I assume most people haven't heard about, that I think would be compelling enough to kind of kind of lure readers along for 200 or 300 pages and read like fiction, but actually based on true stories.
Mhm.
So a few years ago now, actually back in 2015, I had some friends who were writers and weirdos like me who'd visited Paris, and they said when they visited Paris, they wanted to go check out this notorious 40-foot long scroll written in the bowels of the Bastille prison right before the French Revolution by the most notorious name in literature, who and considered the worst thing ever written. And they showed up at this museum where it was supposed to be, and the place was boarded up, and there were French police carting boxes out the front door who told them that the operation had been shut down because the owner of the operation, the person who had just recently bought this notorious scroll, supposedly a cursed scroll, had then right after been accused of being the Bernie Madoff of France.
Wow.
That's super fascinating, and I've never heard about it, and there was no coverage of it at all here in the States. So I'm like, it could be some potential.
Maybe my curiosity was because in the title you have a notorious scoundrel, and I was like, wait, there's someone bigger than me out there who's a notorious scoundrel. In fact, we were going to name the show that originally, the Notorious Scoundrel Show. In fact, if we do a side podcast, we'll do that as well. So give us an overview, like a 30,000 foot view of kind of what's in the book, and then we'll get into some of the details.
Yeah. So the book kind of tracks three different stories. One is the Notorious Scoundrel. This is the Marquis de Sade, who is this horrible French aristocrat, definitely very much the Jeffrey Epstein of his day, except worse.
Oh, wow.
But then instead of dying under mysterious circumstances in prison, he ends up becoming obsessed with becoming a writer, and he wrote some of the most despicable literature ever created, and that's actually how we have the term sadism or sadistic, because the idea of deriving pleasure from pain comes from the horrible guy, the Marquis de Sade. So that's one of the stories.
His namesake, de Sade, is the root word of sadism, where it comes from. Is that correct?
Yes.
Wow.
And there's still Sade family members, and it gets a bit awkward. One of them was a government minister in France, a lovely fellow who the press had a field day when they learned that Sade was in charge of family and women's matters. So that was phenomenal a few years ago.
It sounds like the 50 Shades of Grey of the whenever this was written.
No, in some ways, that's what a lot of people think, but actually, it's much worse.
Oh,
it's
wow.
much more like a literary version of the movie Saw or Hostel. Like it's much more like pure torture. It's horrible stuff. I don't want any of your listeners to go read that book. They can read my book, and I'm careful not to do big gross quotes, but don't read this novel, Sade's novel, which is called 120 Days of Sodom. So that's the first story. Okay. The second story is about this manuscript. So he wrote it while imprisoned, 40-foot long scroll called 120 Days of Sodom. And it became one of these kind of mythical relics that after the fall of the Bastille and the start of the French Revolution ended up being kind of transported all over Europe in the centuries to come, and ended up hidden in a erotica collector's library, ended up in Berlin and helped fuel a sexual revolution in Berlin before the rise of the Nazis. It was then bought by famous Parisian art patrons and became a centerpiece of the surrealism movement in the 1930s in France. It was stolen and smuggled to Switzerland, ended up in the hands of one of the richest men in the world, and there were international court battles. So it was one of these incredible journeys. And then in 2014, it gets purchased for about $10 million, which makes it one of the most valuable manuscripts in the world, comparable to Shakespeare's First Folio and the Gutenberg Bible. For $10 million, it was finally brought back to France. Okay, now it's good. Now it's safe. The curse is over, right? And then a few months later, the guy who bought it, who had this massive book and manuscript company, is accused of running the largest Ponzi scheme in French history. Wow. So that's a third story.
Are you worried about getting any part of the curse on you? Like, it's like King Tut or something.
I keep telling people I'm hoping there's no curse because I definitely wrote a whole book on this thing.
Yeah.
So, I'm
Yeah.
I'm an optimistic guy. I'm hoping hoping the curse skips over me.
Yeah. And these are facts. This is a real dude. And he wrote it in the Bastille while he was in prison. What was he in prison for? Can you want to tease that out, or you want to leave that?
So it's funny. I mean, the things that Sade did as a young man is that he engaged in blasphemous acts with a prostitute, poisoned whores, locked a bunch of young men and women in one of his chateaus for his own sexual devices.
Wow.
He ran away to Italy with his sister-in-law, who was living in a convent at the time. So he did all these things, and he keeps getting accused of things. He was, they tried to execute him a couple times, but the reason that he got imprisoned was because his mother-in-law got sick of him.
Oh, wow. Well,
because she was like, I am done with this guy and all this stuff. And she had a good friend in the last king of France. And so, she was like, Louis, can you write one of your royal letters and lock this guy up for, with no actual charges? And I was like, okay. So, yeah. So watch out for those mother-in-laws.
Yeah, that's still true today. You got to watch out for those. There's a joke we do on the show sometimes in the intro where we're like, the Chris Voss show is a family that loves you and doesn't judge you, unlike your mother-in-law. It's a joke we'll tell on the ramble every now and then. But no, man, I mean, some of the things you listed there, prostitutes, locking people in chateaus. That's just Fridays around the Chris Voss show. That's
good, man.
normal for
okay.
us. Yeah.
I get
it. A little bit of spear rhino. I don't know what's going on. I'm just doing jokes here, people. Don't get all upset and write me. But this is really interesting. How does he write this thing? Is he supposed to be writing it in the prison? And it's a 40-foot scroll. Like, how do you make sure the guards don't take it? And it seems like a really unique piece of literary history.
I mean, it's interesting. So in some ways, there was this kind of cottage industry about horrible rumors and stories coming out of this fearsome Bastille prison where everyone was locked away with the skeletons and rats. Now, Sade was part of the French nobility, part of the French aristocracy. Part of the French aristocracy, and pretty high up. So yes, he was locked away, but he had literally everything he could imagine in his cell. He had hundreds of books. He had nice furniture. He had certain sexual devices crafted to very specific sizes by one of Paris's preeminent cabinet makers, because he gets lonely in there.
That's true.
And so no, he had access to writing materials. He had access to paper and quills and ink. Now, this particular writing was so obscene, so scandalous that he knew if he was caught with it, even with his aristocratic reputation, that he would get in trouble. So he took lots of small pieces of paper and pasted them end to end. And this thing's tiny. This thing is honestly looks like a roll of toilet paper. So it's about 4 inches wide.
Wow.
And he would write each page and then paste another page beneath it and keep writing. He did this for like 27 nights. And then he rolled it up. He rolled up this 40-foot long scroll and hid it between the stones of his cell wall because he didn't want anybody to find this thing.
Wow. And so it was deemed at the time that now was what he wrote in the 120 Days of Sodom, was it his own stories, or was there a lot of this going on, abuse by the aristocrats of commoners in sexual ways and different things going on, and he just was kind of the one who told on them?
This is one of the big outstanding arguments about the scroll, which is why the heck did this guy write this thing? Why would someone have spent, this thing was a huge amount of work. This guy, the writing is so small, it's hard to read without a magnifying glass. Would have. So the question is, why would he have bothered writing this horrible thing? What was the point, right? And some people say, oh, it's because Sade was just this kind of deranged criminal, and he was writing about the stuff that he did, for example, when he locked young people in his chateau, or stuff that he wanted to do, and it was his way of kind of acting this stuff out. Now, other people say, no, Sade was actually kind of a revolutionary ahead of his time, and he was working to expose the corruption of the aristocracy into which he was born, and because Sade was far from the only aristocrat doing horrible things at the time to seek out pleasure. There's lots of stories of abusive aristocrats, and that was one of the many factors that would lead to the French Revolution in just a few years. So, but we don't know. Like we don't know what led this guy who was locked in prison to spend so much time and effort on this essentially unreadable manuscript.
Wow. And now I know the basis of the word sadism.
Yeah.
Yeah, he should have married the guy who wrote the scroll for masochism, because everyone says sadomasochism together. I don't know what to mean.
Exactly. Would have been beautiful.
There's probably a scroll for that. And this thing survives like the Nazi book burnings. It sounds like, there was a lot of people who liked it as a collector's item or a rarity or its novelty. But then there was also lots of people who wanted to hunt it down and kill it, maybe. And we've had that through history. In fact, we have that now where we have certain people that want to still burn books. In fact, there was a preacher recently who did a book burning, I think. Awesome. So how does it survive all this stuff?
No, it is interesting where this thing is this incredibly unique and fragile object. And there were multiple points when it very well should have been destroyed. Like it narrowly escaped the sacking of the Bastille, where it very could have been destroyed. It ended up in Germany in the early 20th century and was seen as this kind of an early scientific textbook of sexual diversity. And it was actually this kind of thriving institute of sexual science in Berlin at the time, until the 1930s. Nazis came in and ransacked the institute, took all of the books, all of the materials, and had a massive book burning. And so so this scroll could have been destroyed then. It had escaped Germany a few years before then.
Wow.
And and moved on back to Paris for a bit, where it was this kind of icon of the kind of avant-garde movement. So it is this kind of this fascinating odyssey where it's almost like a movie where it keeps, almost like Sade himself, it keeps escaping from execution at the last minute.
Wow. And it's extraordinary. I mean, we've had people on that talked about the Rosetta Stone and different things. I mean, this is extraordinary in literary history. I mean, regardless of what you think about sadism or, some of the stuff that's in it, just the fact that how it's written and how it's endured and the interest that people have in it. It's almost like the 50 Shades of Grey. I mean, of today. I mean, it's probably written better than 50 Shades of Grey. Originally, the 50 Shades of Grey was like a horrible manuscript. It probably still is. I don't know. I've never read it, but evidently a lot of misspellings and different things. I think it was independently published, but this is kind of interesting. Like now I know the root word of sado or sadism and stuff like that. I joke with all my married friends, they're sadists. Like all my married husbands, I'm like, you guys are sadists. You guys love pain. That's why you guys get married. But I'm a single guy and I've been single all my life, so I can tell that joke and I can tease my married friends. Yeah, and I can be like, hey, I'll just skip that joke. But no, it's interesting where this comes. I tease my married friends a lot. I revel a bit too much in my singledom and they hate me, but they also live vicariously through me, because like I said, we do the same things on weekends, on Fridays around here. So this gentleman, you talk about this particular rise and fall of this gentleman in France who at one time was the king of manuscripts.
Yes. The king of manuscripts.
Did the Bernie made off of France that he, they find him out for? Does that have anything to do with the manuscript, or is that a whole nother issue?
It is all tied together in that France, in particular, these certain small neighborhoods in Paris have long been known as the epicenter of the rare book world. So if you were an elite rare book collector, you would go to these tiny bookshops right off the center. You would go to the auction houses in central Paris. And this is where you would kind of bid and buy and sell, first editions of Hemingway's novels, of original scripts of War of the Worlds. So this was the elite market for this stuff, people who were quite rich. And then in the early 2000s, this completely unexpected fellow, self-made son of a plumber in France, his name is Gerard Liertier. He said, you know what? It's time to shake up this market. So he created a new company. It was called Aristocrat. And he was like, hey, instead of only kind of rich people going and buying, selling this stuff, I'm going to open this market up to everybody. So he went out. He had independent advisors go to teachers and police officers and all sorts of kind of other middle class people all over France and all over Europe and say, hey, you can buy a share of this manuscript. You can buy a share of the Little Prince, of this Mozart kind of concerto. And you can own a share of this literary history. And best of all, after 5 years, when you sell it back, when you sell your share back to us, you get a 40% return. So basically, he turned this tiny, elite, isolated market of rare books, manuscripts, and these things were real, into a giant financial vehicle. It became just basically an investment company.
Wow.
So this thing became huge. 18,000 people invested in this thing. Yeah, he ended up collecting one of the largest, or amassing one of the largest collection of manuscripts and letters in the world. And then and one of his last acquisitions and one of his most famous acquisitions was this $10 million scroll of the Marquis de Sade, and at that point he was kind of at the top of the world. And then a few months later, the authorities came in and said, this thing is just a giant Ponzi scheme and we're shutting the whole thing down.
Busted. So did the French government ever have like an issue with this, where they found it was an embarrassment? Maybe there was some political, like, we need to shut this down. This makes the French look bad, as if those surrenders in World War I and II didn't look bad at all.
That's a really good question, Chris. And one of the things, I mean, it's kind of like the mystery around Sade, like what his motivations are. So this guy Gerard Liertier, the one-time king of manuscripts, he's yet to go on trial. So he's still awaiting trial. So that's why we have to say an alleged Ponzi scheme, because the authorities say this was a Ponzi scheme and we're trying to protect everybody. Well, Liertier says, you guys were just jealous of my success. You were threatened by my success, and you decided to destroy my operation, especially because then you could get kind of choice manuscripts and get them for the state, including the scroll of the Marquis de Sade. So
maybe a politician just wanted that.
Yes.
Those politicians are kind of sadists too. Sometimes they get caught up in some interesting stuff. You always hear about that every now and then.
Yeah, but they'd have to read it. So
that's true.
Yeah, there's no audiobook, I don't think, of 120 Days of Sodom. That stuff.
Is there an audiobook of 50 Shades of Grey? I don't know why I'm doing
I'm sure,
but it seems like a good joke to reference. So this is really interesting. I mean, a historical thing. You see how this is somehow maintained itself over time, and so where is it now? If you can tell us, or if you want to leave that in the book, that we want people to buy the book so that they can find out.
Can I be incredibly selfish and self-serving and
Sure.
say that to find out where this notorious manuscript that has been all over Europe, where it is now, folks might have to go buy the book.
Go buy the book.
Is that
there
okay?
You go. We were actually going to call the podcast the incredibly self-serving podcast, but people just kind of know that's the way I roll anyway. So
yeah,
I think that or was the Narcissistic Assholes podcast, and people just refer.
They had a lot of options.
Yeah, they still run up to me at shows and stuff and events, and they scream thechrisvossshow.com, that whole part we sing at the beginning, because somehow that became a thing back in the day. And if I stop doing it, I get hate mail. Why do you stop singing the intro? And I'm just like, do we have to keep doing that? It was like a bit we did of Howard Stern when Howard Stern would do the WNBC, the Chris Voss show. So we did it for a week, and now it's stuck for 13 years. So what are you going to do? Anything more you want to tease out about the book, so that we should get people who want to go?
Well, okay. So I tried to, this is nonfiction. So everything that I write about happened. I have extensive boring footnotes. This thing is thoroughly. But what I really tried to do is write it like a thriller. I tried to really write it like this is, I tried to write books like I've heard of Devil in the White City by Eric Larson, which is about the serial killer. Chicago. I tried to write it as a page turner because all I wanted to do was to entertain readers. So what I tried, if folks are interested in larger than life historical tales, if they're interested in international capers, looking for a good beach read or vacation read, I mean, that's kind of how I tried to write this thing. It's supposed to be fascinating and fun. And for those listeners, viewers who might be a bit squeamish, I don't know how many of your listeners would be like that, Chris.
They put
as
up
I
with
said,
me so far, so I don't know.
Yeah, so this is probably not a concern, but I actually try not to focus kind of too much on the writing of this horrible manuscript because actually it is horribly written, like it's useless to read. To me, it's much more fascinating was the stories and the scandals and the people around this thing.
Yeah, I mean the history of it. I mean that's what's always intrigued me, and that's why we always have great authors like yourself on the show, is learning about history and some of the things that have gone on. There's a lot of things that I didn't know. That fell through the nooks and crannies, and stuff like this. And yeah, I mean, I think my audience are mostly sadists because they enjoy the pain of listening to me every day. But there's that, they keep coming back for more, and I wonder about them. Maybe they need a psychiatrist, but we have those on the show too. So we try and be all inclusive as to take care of the show. But I've seen parts of 50 Shades of Grey, and the chicks dug it. So what are you gonna do? Hey, if you like, but the history is amazing. All types. Yeah, like now I'm going to be able to walk around and brag to everybody that, because of your book, I know the core root of sadism, and people are going to be like, why does he keep bringing them up parties? But it's fun, and I'll be able to.
Did I make your brain bleed a little bit?
Yeah, just a little bit. Just a little bit,
which is what,
hemorrhage, but
as a sadist, it's what you want, man.
Yeah, I think I'm more of a masochist, but I don't know. I derive pleasure from making people have painful noise in their eardrums from the sound of my voice. So
that's pretty sadistic.
Yeah, well, what are you gonna do? For some reason, people sign up for it, so I'll just keep doing it for 13 years. Well, this has been really insightful, Joel, to have you on the show. Give us your .com so people can look you up on the internet and find out what's wrong with you.
I'll show my book. How about that? This is I'm supposed to be trying to promote my book as my publisher. So here it is. Here's the book.
There you go.
You guys see that?
The Curse of the Marquis.
The Curse of the Marquis de Sade, out now internationally. You can find out how to buy it at your favorite local bookstore at www.joelwarner, JOELWARNER.com. So www.joelwarner.com.
There you go. And thank you very much for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for the fantastic chat, Chris. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been fun, and it's interesting too. I think a lot of people will take interest in it because they'll be, now you can walk around and you can be all smart and tell people, hey, you know what where sadism comes from, that word.
Yeah.
And there's this dude, and it's an interesting story, the Bastille and France and French lemon, and this sounds like something the French would come up with anyway. That I don't know.
It's very
that. French are lovely people, but I know they hate us Americans, so whatever. Anyway, it's funny. I'm just being funny. We love the French. I think we have a pretty good French audience. I think I'll have to check the numbers. I know around the world they love us. So anyway, check out the book, guys. Order it wherever fine books are sold, but only go to those fine bookstores, because if you go to the Bastille, those alleyway bookstores, you might, need a tetanus shot or get mugged. I was mugged last week at one. Anyway, guys, order it up wherever fine books are sold. February 21st, 2023. The Curse of the Marquis de Sade, a notorious scoundrel, a mythical manuscript, and the biggest scandal in literary history. And that's not about me. That's kind of interesting. Anyway, guys, for the show to your family, friends, and relatives, remember the Chris Voss Show is like an MLM, but not like an MLM. You need to have 5 people in your downline you refer the show to, or else there's nowhere else. I'm just kidding, folks. Go to youtube.com/Chris Voss, goodreads.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss. All those crazy places we are on the internet. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. And we'll see you guys next time. And that's